K98talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98talk.com.
We believe in the American way, and we built this country called the USA, and we fly our flag because we're proud and free, we're Americans. Red, white, and blue is our way of life. We never back down from a challenge or a fight. Nature provides, God gives the rights, we're Americans. We fish the waters and we hunt the lands. We forge the steel with our own two hands. With what we've got, we do the best we can, we're Americans.
It's time now for the Conservative Curmudgeon Radio Show on K98 Talk. Now, here's Grouchy.
Thank you. Great to be with you this Thursday night. We have a packed show. We're running a couple minutes behind due to a couple little technical difficulties, but nothing we can't handle here. And we're going to knock this thing out. We may not get through everything I've got today because there's been a couple things pop up in the news over the last couple days since I actually finished writing this week's show. But, I wanted to start. We're going to start by opening up the phone lines, actually. 408-681-8255. That's 408-681-8255. Call with any topic. You don't have to be on topic with me. Anything that's burning a hole in your head, just let's get it out there and talk about it and see what we could figure out. So anyway, this week, our president started his week off with a trip to India. He was very giddy about this trip because he was going to co-host the monthly radio address to the Indian people with Prime Minister Modi over there. But he cut his visit a day short after the address so that he could unexpectedly go to Saudi Arabia and allegedly pay his respects to King Abdullah, who passed away. Now, big question is why? You see, it's a well-known fact that King Abdullah didn't really care for Obama at all. He thought poorly of him as a person and probably even more so as a leader. So why would Obama cut this much-anticipated visit to India short to attend the funeral of a man who couldn't stand him? Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to first give you what the White House is shoveling out, which can be used in the Rose Garden if you catch my drift. The official line of crap from the White House was that President Obama was there to show support and solidarity for one of our most trusted Middle East allies. And then they rattled off a few platitudes and a couple of lies about how King Abdullah and Obama were really good friends and how there's a tremendous amount of respect for the Saudi royal family. Blah, 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 blah. More lies, more platitudes. Get out the chapstick, kiss somebody's ass, and that's the official White House line. Now, when I finished writing this piece on Tuesday, something weird happened the next day, and it was Wednesday morning when I got up. I absolutely had no clue that gas prices were changing, and what I saw is that gas prices from 7 o'clock Wednesday morning to 5 o'clock Wednesday afternoon jumped 15 cents where I live. Now, I put it out on Twitter and I asked if anybody else had seen this happen too. And I did have a few responses that said they witnessed pretty much the same thing. So this is more than just a coincidence that it happened on the day that Obama was touching down in Saudi Arabia, in my opinion. And I'm going to give you my take on what's going on with Saudi Arabia and their new king and our current boy king, President Obama. So he cut this visit to India short and he went to Saudi Arabia, and he did this so he could greet the new king, Salman. My opinion is that Obama wants to convince King Salman to cut production of their oil, which will in turn raise the cost of oil, and again in turn raise the cost of our gasoline. You see, it really is quite simple. The royal family, if you know anything about Saudi Arabia, there's about 1,000 of them, and they live posh. I mean, what a great place to be, royalty. But if you're not royalty, it almost goes straight from the sovereign and the princes under him to straight up dirt road poverty. And the royal family does pay money out to the Saudi people based on some of their oil sales. So what I believe President Obama's agenda is to get Saudi's oil production cut, drive the cost of oil, and in turn gasoline up. He's going to pitch this to King Salman as a way to increase Saudi Arabia's revenue and gross national product, and therefore he would be able to pay out more money to the people of Saudi Arabia, which will make him an instant hero very early on in his reign. And it's almost kind of scary that gas prices jumped 15 cents in one day just because he was landing there. Now, the other side of this is if Obama can convince him to do this, what it allows Obama to do is to break back into his huge push for green energy and start throwing yours and my tax dollars at these companies that he's wasted billions upon billions of dollars on that have folded up and gone bankrupt. Solyndra comes to mind. It's not a secret that early on in Obama's time in office that he and Secretary of Energy Stephen Chu, who is now gone, they plotted to drive oil and electricity prices high, which would spur investment and need of these green energies. So now that Chu is gone, his replacement is Dr. Ernest Moniz, and he's just another chip off the green block, and he's a real yes man, just like Chu was. So he and Obama are not going to let the death of King Abdullah go to waste. And if you remember your Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, the rule never let a crisis go to waste. Well, the crisis is for the people of Saudi Arabia, not the people of America like Obama's going to make it out to be. These people work for next to nothing, and anything they get from the government is bonus. So, under this plan to shut down U.S. production of gas and oil, as well as to hurt the Russian economy, the Saudis have been hurting their own people. Well, and there's benefit to it. They're really putting the pinch on Russia, who tune in next week because we're going to elaborate on Russia a little more and how they've got their sticky little oil fingers into our green energy efforts in this country. And we're going to try to figure out why and who's driving it. just a little teaser for next week, but Obama will tell him that by cutting the production and driving up the oil, that he'll be able to ease the suffering of his people and become a national hero within the first month of his reign as king. And he's also going to entice him into doing this by probably hanging some kind of aid package that would likely be cash infused with some kind of military assets. We've been selling and giving military assets to Saudi Arabia for years, so this would be nothing new. And this alone is the only possible real reason Obama could have had for cutting his much hyped and much anticipated trip to India short and attending the funeral of a man who couldn't stand the sight of him. So I'll be watching and waiting for true details behind this trip in the future, and I will be sure to pass them along, whatever the facts bear out, whether I'm right or wrong. And this piece has simply been my observation for what it's worth. Now, moving on. Moving on. Give me just a quick second here. We're having, like I said, some technical difficulties. So I'm going to tweet out another link for the show, just in case. And again, going to give out the number here. It's 408-681-8255. That's 408-681-8255. And we're going to press on. And if you were listening in the last hour, you heard my boy Double R throwing the lowdown on these Chris Kyle detractors and American Sniper detractors. And I just want to say good job, Rick. I appreciate that, because that is part of what I'm going to rant on a little bit too. So we have, everybody knows that Michael Moore about a week ago took to Twitter, but he wasn't done with himself. He didn't get enough attention, apparently. I guess mommy and daddy don't tie the pork chop around his neck anymore, so the dog's ignoring him too. And he bravely took to Twitter to avail himself of his First Amendment right of freedom of speech. However, what's even more of a shame is that Moore didn't avail himself of using his right to engage his brain before opening his pie hole to denigrate Chris Kyle, man who inspired the box office smash American Sniper. Now, Moore's a blathering idiot. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But he really is as dumb as he sounds. He's been languishing in anonymity for a few years now. But, through a stroke of luck, he found a way to, I don't know, what do we want to say, lower himself below the level of whale shit and put himself back into the spotlight. He doesn't care if it's negative spotlight. He just knows it's spotlight and he can't live without it. And then probably unbeknownst to him at first, after his original denigration, he gained his mini-me in the person of Seth Rogen, who, again, is scrambling for attention after his movie was dumped and then released and then dumped and then put out on streaming services, and I think it probably made about $6,000. Congratulations, Seth Rogen. You're officially a dumbass, too. But these two combined must have the IQ of a rotted head of cauliflower, because to me, they're just as smart and brave as Jesse Ventura's wrinkled, patchouli-stinking, cowardly ass. Now, Moore rolled off a string of tweets and was trying to, for somebody that doesn't believe in God, he sure likes to try to invoke his name a lot. He said, tomorrow's Sunday school. What would Jesus do? Oh, I know. He'd hide on top of a roof and shoot people in the back. Classy. His second tweet. But what would Jesus do if he could be a sniper and save soldiers' lives by shooting savages in the back and asking for an answer? And then he put his own answer out that said, Jesus wouldn't put any soldiers' lives in harm's way in the first place because he wouldn't have sent them to Iraq. Apparently, Mr. Moore doesn't know a whole lot about the Bible. God sent plenty of people into battle. That's fact. So the next line he put out was Sunday school source, Pope John Paul II. The Iraq War, invading Iraq, is not a just war. He and the current Pope oppose this immoral war. So, instead of he said, instead of being a sniper to protect our troops, I tried to save their lives by stopping Bush from sending them to their deaths in Iraq. This guy is an incredible buffoon. And I just can't even, a long time ago, a wise man, that's not Michael Moore for those that are just checking in. He is not a wise man, but a wise man once wrote, they profess to know God, but they deny him by their works. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for any good work. Now, Rogan and Moore have every right to state their opinion, but let me tell you something. These are beta males. They are betas, and they're exercising their right to be pacifists. And the irony of this is in America, you can't be a pacifist without the men and women who are willing to wage war and defend those rights for you. Maybe instead of berating and denigrating war and the brave men and women who are willing to fight them, you should try to learn a little bit about what it takes to become one of them. The sacrifices they make are unfathomable to many people, especially pacifists. And maybe instead of blasting film director Clint Eastwood's work, Moore should make a movie of his own, maybe make an anti-sniper blockbuster. But then again, what the hell would Michael Moore know about making a blockbuster? And I'm really sick of hearing about him and Rogan, so I'm just going to stop right there, and I'm not going to pay him any more attention. I'm tired of them, and I don't want to talk about them anymore. So we're going to press on. And if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we had this little event in America called the State of the Union Address. Obama touted America's success in the oil production industry like it was something he had a hand in. And I guess in a weird sort of kind of way, he did. He shut down the leases on government lands and forced the oil industry to seek out privately owned land to drill on. And without that backhanded motivation, America may not have become number one in oil production. But it's important, very important for Mr. President and his administration, namely Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough, who is going to get a seriously undue amount of attention from me this week. And we'll go into that a little bit later about why. But McDonough was, let me find my notes here, please. I will be all over this momentarily. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So McDonough was doing the Mr. Producer, I see you sent me a message, but I can't see it. So if you need to break in and speak, just go right ahead.
Nah, I was just giving you a hard time when you were like, he's going to get some undue attention from me. I was like, bow, chicka, wow, wow.
Oh, no, not that kind of attention, but, oh, pardon me, still kicking the cough from the nasty bug I had a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, as I predicted before the State of the Union address, the Obama administration is now trying to take credit for this increase in U.S. oil and gas production. And like I said, it happened in spite of him, not because of him. But Dennis McDonough was, he was on the Sunday morning talk show circuit. And let's see, where's my note on him? Yeah, there it is. Okay, so he was touting our increased oil production as one of Obama's accomplishments. And he was in an interview with Chris Wallace, and it just amazes me that McDonough had the nerve to sit there and take credit for it. And Mr. Producer, I know I asked you if we could grab that soundbite. I'm going to go ahead and ask if we can play that soundbite. And this is Dennis McDonough, the White House Chief of Staff, with Chris Matthews Sunday morning.
But the other thing, here's where the president is not going to trim back his agenda, Chris. He is not going to say that we should trim back our agenda working for middle-class families in this country. He's not. That it's decades now that wages have stagnated for hardworking middle-class families. He is saying enough is enough. We're out of the crisis of the last several years. Unemployment's down under 5.6%. More oil produced in this country than at any time in the last several decades.
No thanks to the Obama administration.
Well, sometimes
it's all happening on.
Sometimes you guys, sometimes Chris, you're inclined to tell us that we're responsible for things that are happening that are bad, but we're not responsible for anything that's good.
It says it didn't happen on federal land; it happened on private land and state land, and in fact, the administration was opposed to a lot of the fracking. One last question, if I may,
because more clean energy than ever in this country.
Again, more oil
thanks
and
to
gas,
the administration. More oil and gas produced in this country than ever before.
Again, no thanks to the administration.
We're producing more than we import for the first time in 2 decades. That means lower energy prices. That means more jobs. And it's time for us to focus on the middle class.
Okay.
The president will not trim his sails on that, Chris. He will not.
All right, well, there you have McDonough stamping hard on the fact that this is to Obama's credit. This is absolutely ridiculous. You heard Chris Wallace pounding on him, talking about no thanks to the Obama administration. And McDonough was insistent that they get the credit for the good and the bad. If they're going to take the bad, you have to give them the good. Well, it doesn't work that way. Good or bad, you don't get credit for anything unless you actually earn it. And I see I'm getting, I got a little hate tweet action going on here. This is so funny. He's so cute. Little Johnny, go play in the traffic.
Haterade, do you?
We are producing more oil and gas than we have in decades. And that does mean lower energy prices for some. It does mean more jobs for many. And, McDonough thinks that it's time to focus on the middle class again. And just to back up what Chris Wallace was saying and what I was saying before the State of the Union, according to a March 2013 Congressional Research Service report, U.S. natural gas production has increased 20% since fiscal year 07. Natural gas production on federal lands fell by 33% during that same time frame. And while production on non-federal lands grew by 40% during that same time frame. It's the story, same story with oil production on non-federal lands. There were modest fluctuations in oil production from fiscal years '08 to 2010, and then a significant increase from 10 to 12, increasing total U.S. oil production by about 1.1 million barrels a day over fiscal year '07. And all the increase from '07 to 12 took place on non-federal lands. And the federal share of total U.S. crude oil production fell by about 7 percentage points. In a February 2012 speech, President Obama insisted the U.S. can't just drill our way to lower gas prices. And this is driving his, we're going back to it, his green energy priority and imposed. He has just now announced through the EPA that they're going to, for the first time ever, meticulously regulate methane emissions from new natural gas wells. This has never been done before, and this is in an attempt to curb fracking. So he sees lower gas prices. He sees that this is driving more people out into the economy. They're freer because they have more money in their pocket to spend with lower gas prices. They're purchasing more gas. They're purchasing more goods and services. And his idea to pivot to helping the middle class is to ask for higher taxes. How the hell does that help the middle class? We're the ones that pay the taxes anyway. So again, this guy is way many sandwiches short of a picnic basket. So, and then we get this update, their big attempt to help the middle class. Well, remember last week I talked about how he wanted to tax the 529 education savings accounts that grow tax deferred. And he was going to do this to help pay for his free 2 years of community college Ponzi scheme. At the time of this news, there's no alternative plan. He's yanked this idea of taxing the 529s because he realizes what that's going to do to his legacy, which is first and foremost to him, and B, what it would really do to the Democrats' chances of keeping the White House in 2016 or retaking any House or Senate seats. So he has pulled this plan for taxing the 529 accounts, and there is no idea to replace it. So we're now looking at Obama still not backing away from his spending plan, but the biggest piece of funding the spending plan, which he was still billions of dollars short on, is now not going to come through either. So where are we going to get this money from for his spending plan? Interesting. Anyway, so that's enough of that, and we'll press on. There's a new story that the National Journal broke this past week about a new caucus in the House of Representatives. And we have a new Republican caucus that met Monday to establish bylaws of their new caucus and simple principles. There are two of them. Two simple principles for this caucus. Rank and file Republicans must pressure leadership to enact more conservatively on their agenda. And secondly, this pressure should never involve frantic scurrying about on the House floor. So they want to push Republican leadership in a more conservative direction, and they don't want to look like idiots on C-SPAN doing it. So this new caucus, the House Freedom Caucus, is an invitation-only group that will work in concert in order to guide House Republican conferences at key junctures, starting with the debate over border security and this new bill that has some conservatives alarmed. Jim Jordan, Republican, Ohio, is the de facto chairman of the group pending formal elections. And he said, "We're going to focus on what we believe middle-class voters sent us here to do." Isn't it about time somebody said that since the November elections? Not like Boehner's outrageous claim that he was the Tea Party before there was a Tea Party. Boehner wouldn't know what Tea Party was if he spilled hot tea in his lap and had his own little case of Deflategate. So the caucus devoted to moving leadership's agenda to the right has a chance to take over the role traditionally held by the Republican Study Committee, which many lawmakers believe has strayed from its founding mission to pressure moderate GOP leaders to adopt more conservative positions. Representative Jordan is a former chairman of the Republican Study Committee, and he wants to avoid any tension with the longer-standing group. Said Jordan, "I like to think that a smaller, more cohesive, more agile group can buttress and support some of the good policies and good ideas that are coming from the RSC. The group has 9 founding members that include Jordan and Representatives Raul Labrador of Idaho, Justin Amash of Michigan, Ron DeSantis of Florida, John Fleming of Louisiana, Scott Garrett of New Jersey, Mark Meadows of North Carolina, Mick Mulvaney of South Carolina, and Matt Salmon of Arizona. Now, these founding members are going to be the ones who decide who gets an invite to join the group, and they're going to take on a much bigger burden to finance the hiring of staff, and they're going to pay what they're calling mortgages, but it's not a mortgage in a traditional sense, but a higher level of funding for the organization than the rest of the dues-paying members will be required to provide. And they're hoping to cap the group at around 40 lawmakers and expect to debut with more than 30. So it's not going to be, something that 100 people join in once they see what it is. This is an invitation only, and and like they say, they expect to debut with more than 30 and cap it at 40, because the 30 is a crucial number because it takes 29 dissents in procedure to block a House Republican majority bill from passing. So, this group does not envision itself as another in the long line of conservative rebellions against House Speaker John Boehner, though. These lawmakers are hoping to refine the process by which conservatives pressure leadership so as to shape policy outcomes while avoiding melodramatic floor fights between Republicans. The unofficial spokesman for the group, Raul Labrador, said, quote, "We're trying to push the entire conference to the right, but you can only do that effectively if you do it in a positive way. You can only do it effectively if there are no surprises. If we go ahead and sit down with leadership and let them know what we want, why we want it, and what ideas we have to improve the product or process." Pretty smart fellow. And I just realized that I have run way past the bottom of the hour, and I probably need to take a break, so I'm going to take a break, get something to drink, and I'll be right back.
America, something to see, baby. Ain't that America? Home on the free, yeah.
K98Talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98Talk.com. The staff of K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network is proud to announce that our very own Rowdy Rick Robinson has been selected as one of the top conservative talk show hosts in the nation for his program, America Off the Rails. Again, congratulations to Rowdy Rick Robinson for a job well done and another reason to stay connected to K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network.
This is Misty, owner of Wax It Studio in Edmond, Oklahoma, and I'm here to talk to you about a skincare product called Theramedics. Theramedics has a wonderful line of products from anti-aging to hyperpigmentations all the way to acne. In fact, everyone at some point in our life is affected by acne. Acne can cause a great deal of embarrassment and anxiety, and in order to prevent and help other people, I have tapped into this wonderful product called Theramedics. Visit my website at www.prettyskindeep.com. Again, that's www.prettyskindeep.com.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan.
This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
The feeling most people get when they hear Barack Obama's speech, I felt this thrill going up my leg. I don't have that too often.
Steady.
It's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. Ricky Robinson, host of America Off the Rails, will tackle the important issues facing America today as he tries to keep America from coming off the track. Get ready to hear the truth every Monday through Friday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, and on Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern and 11 Central here on K98Talk.com and the Spark Radio Network.
To the face of the new democracy. You and me, ain't that America? Something to see, baby. Ain't that America?
On, yeah, keep on with it. I like it. There, come on, whip that applause up. All right, so we're back, and we left off with this new Republican study committee that's being formed, the new caucus that's being formed, hopefully to replace the Republican study committee. But the RSC has served as the leading conservative caucus in the GOP since 1973, when it started as an informal group with just a few members and has now grown in size to 170 members. That's close to 3/4 of the Republican majority. And many conservatives believe it's just become too big of a monster to represent, what it was originally intended for, and is now more of the establishment wing of the party. And you got fissures in the RSC that became apparent when then Chairman Steve Scalise fired the caucus's longtime executive director for leaking information about conversations between members to outside groups that opposed a bipartisan budget deal in 2013. Scalise went on to win a race for House Whip, and while the fired aide Paul Teller went to work for Senator Ted Cruz. Interesting turn of events there. But this Freedom Caucus is forming just days after Boehner suggested that conservative frustration with his leadership is misguided. I don't see it as being misguided. John, can I call you John? But frankly, a lot's being driven by national groups in D.C. who have raised money, and they just, pounded on Boehner. And he said as much to CBS during a joint interview with the new Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, one of the most ruthless men in all of Washington, D.C. He may not wield a big hammer or a big stick, but Mitch McConnell knows how to just cut you to pieces. And he's kind of scary that way. He's not very bright, but he's kind of scary, very vindictive. But DeSantis said that Boehner's critique might apply to some groups, but not to the prominent conservative organizations such as Heritage Foundation and Club for Growth. I don't think that we'd be able to generate outrage or generate dissatisfaction where none existed, DeSantis said. I think they're tapping into an existing dissatisfaction with Republican leadership and with Washington, D.C. more generally. Initially, this new organization hopes to ease that dissatisfaction by influencing the debate over the border security bill drafted by Homeland Security Chairman Michael McCaul, Republican of Texas. So if you're out there and you're from Texas and you're listening, you really need to know what Michael McCaul is up to. And the bill was actually filed Wednesday with an amendment deadline of 10 a.m. Monday morning, leaving very little time to review it and draft formal changes. And this hasty process is taking place before the Senate has even voted on the House's attempt to block the implementation of Obama's executive amnesty. And this is leading some lawmakers to fear that GOP leadership will use the border security bill as a consolation prize for conservatives who were promised to fight against Obama's immigration actions, what I like to call crimmigration, because it is criminal. Whether anybody wants to admit it or not, I don't know. I've never heard anybody say that this act in particular was criminal, but it is. So anyway, they'll have that discussion on Monday after finalizing bylaws, but Jordan would prefer for House Republicans to hold off on the border security legislation until the fight over the executive amnesty plays out in the Senate. And the closing quote he had was, "The focus should be on the president's unconstitutional action."
All right, folks, this is Rick Robinson. We're back live with you again. I don't know what happened, because there for a minute, Grouchy's numbers were going completely crazy, and then everything shut down. So I think a lot of you were trying to tune in all at once. We are back live with you now right here on K98Talk.com and the Spark Radio Network. I'm going to turn everything back over to Grouchy so he can finish up what he had to say, and then we'll call it a night.
All right. Well, thanks, Rick. I can't believe that I had enough people trying to listen to actually shut the server down. That is incredible. Thank you very much. We're going to take that as a win. And we're going to push on with where we were, which was right at the beginning of this. I'm going to try to go through this kind of quick. It's a long piece, but I think I can get it in the next few minutes and get us all out of here in time for Chainsaw Mama, our friend Bunny. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's upcoming address to Congress at the invitation of House Speaker John Boehner is drawing a ton of criticism from allegedly learned people. However, there's a particular criticism that is a bit surprising. That is that the event will not just be bad policy, but that it's even unconstitutional. Now, I'm not sure if this criticism originated on the blog of renowned law professor Peter Spiro, but it is a criticism that has been perpetuated like the new gospel by significant voices in the legal side of the conservative movement. And catch that. You got conservatives calling this invitation for Netanyahu to speak unconstitutional. People with names like Michael Ramsey, Josh Blackman, and David Bernstein. Now, Ramsey, who writes on the Originalism blog, brought forward two basic threads of the argument. The first being, because none of the powers granted to Congress by the Constitution expressly covers such events, Congress cannot host foreign leaders. The second thread that he was attacking on is that the Constitution does expressly empower the president to receive ambassadors and other public ministers, and Congress's invitation to Netanyahu undermines the president's constitutional authority in this sphere. Now, it sounds like he might know what he's talking about, but neither one of these arguments is, shall we say, set in stone. It is true that Congress does not have any enumerated constitutional authorization to meet with foreign leaders, but then again, the same thing can be said of Congress convening hearings, oversight inquiries, public events, or other receptions undertaken to support Congress's ultimate lawmaking and appointment confirming authority. After all, Congress does have constitutional powers to make appropriations in support of foreign policy, to confirm the appointment of diplomatic personnel, and to ratify treaties. So hearing from foreign leaders, and when I say hearing from them, I really mean just hearing from them, can support those constitutional objectives just as congressional hearings support Congress's legislative actions. Not altogether dissimilar, the president's authority to quote-unquote receive ambassadors and other public ministers is surely a broad grant of power. It strains credulity to say that Netanyahu's visit actually interferes or intervenes with the exercise of that presidential power. The president's authority to recognize foreign nations and governments, long recognized as implicit in that constitutional grant, is not at issue here. The administration already recognizes the Israeli government as lawful and legitimate. Congress is not recognizing a government that isn't already recognized by the president. Within its realm of power, the president can exclude foreign officials from the United States, but the Obama administration is not ordering any such exclusion. So while Netanyahu is here, he can meet with Americans, whether they are the people, say, at an event hosted by the Emergency Committee for Israel, or with their elected representatives. It really doesn't matter. And I need to engage my caffeine app to make sure my laptop does not go to sleep again. But Ramsey attempts to correlate the Netanyahu invite to the Citizen Gannett affair, which is a 1793 event in which the French government directed communications to Congress instead of to the unreceptive President George Washington, in hopes of finding a more sympathetic audience, a bit more open to France's plight than Washington himself and his neutrality between Britain and France. The administration, through Secretary of State Jefferson, asserted that the president alone was, quote, the only channel of communication between this country and foreign nations, and Congress acquiesced to that assertion of power. But this analogy loses all sense of proportion, in that France's efforts in 1793 also included commissioning privateers, planning land-based expeditions in the United States, and establishing French prize courts in the United States. That all go well beyond the mere speech that Netanyahu plans to make. So one wonders how far arguments like this against Congress can go. Would Professor Spiro argue that members of Congress cannot travel abroad to meet foreign officials because Nancy Pelosi went to Syria in 2007 and met with them? Would he also prohibit Republican presidential candidates, including members of Congress, from traveling abroad to meet with foreign audiences and leaders like President Obama did in 2008 and presidential candidate Mitt Romney did in 2012, both meeting Netanyahu and then Prime Minister Olmert in Israel? Ultimately, nobody can seriously argue that Congress's invitation to Netanyahu obstructs or obfuscates the executive branch's policies towards Israel. The administration's view of Israel is by now patently clear, and this is evident in the still pending and recent Supreme Court case of Zivotofsky v. Kerry, as in John Kerry, in which the Obama administration is trying to claim authority to nullify a federal law providing that Jerusalem-born Americans can receive a passport designating Israel as their place of birth. A case in which the Obama administration offered a horrifically ill-conceived analogy comparing Israel's control of Jerusalem to Russia's invasion of the Crimean Peninsula. Nothing Congress does pursuant to its long-standing constitutional powers affecting foreign policy will confuse anyone as to the official position of the United States under President Obama with respect to Israel. And now, speaking of the Supreme Court, Professor Spiru's aggressive criticism of Congress's relations with foreign leaders conveniently leaves aside the third branch of the government, the Supreme Court. Would Spiro also, and would his colleagues also, that are, the colleagues that are critical of Congress's invitation to Netanyahu, would they impose similar constraints on the court's communication with foreign nations and their respective leaders? A lot of people don't even know this happens, but the court quite often receives what's known as amicus briefs from foreign nations and leaders urging the court to adopt various constitutional interpretations that would favor them, their country, and or their people. And this is not just in small subset of cases affecting ambassadors, public ministers, and consuls, over which the court does have constitutional jurisdiction, but they also chime in on cases affecting foreign policy more broadly, like Gitmo and immigration, but also involving purely domestic issues such as the death penalty. Would these learned gentlemen and others keep the Supreme Court from accepting any of these type briefs, except for those authorized by the president? Or is Congress the only branch of government that must be cut off from foreign voices? When these type of constitutional arguments are levied toward Congress by either critics of the Republican Party or Israel, it's easy to marginalize them as political arguments wrapped up in rhetoric. But when they come from conservatives or supporters of Israel who usually disagree with the president, maybe they should be taken a little more seriously? I don't know. I don't know any of these gentlemen personally, but in my opinion, they're painting the wall with a trim brush instead of a roller and taking a far too narrow view of the law. And, take it for what it's worth. That's another opinion of mine, but I thought this was very interesting that it was coming from conservatives and not from the moonbat left-wing congressional types. So anyway, folks, that takes us a little past the top of the hour. We didn't get through everything today. I didn't think we would. I knew I wrote too much for the show. And with the technical difficulties, it is what it is. And we will get some of this in next week. I had a request tonight to do a segment on the Bo Bergdahl situation. And I do intend to do some stuff on the Bergdahl situation. But right now, there are simply not enough facts available to the public to do an entire segment. This will, however, be forthcoming. And let me go ahead and say this. If Bergdahl is indeed guilty of desertion, like I believe him to be, I hope that he doesn't get a free pass with the sympathy card of he suffered enough already, because I find that to be utter bullshit. I want his wretched ass incarcerated in Leavenworth, where he can spend the entirety of his life making little bitty rocks out of great big ones. So stay tuned to your favorite Grouch for more on this as the story develops. And Mr. Producer, I'm going to go ahead and end everything right there tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I will get a link out for the podcast. And hope to see you again next Thursday. Thank you so much, and God bless.
All right, folks, thanks for tuning in tonight. Again, I am Rick Robinson, Programming Director here at K98Talk.com. For those of you listening live here in just a moment when everything shuts down, it will actually move right straight into the Liz Harrison show, because at some point we actually did catch up to the TuneIn server. I do apologize to everybody. I explained some of what happened on the air during my show, but we'll have everything ironed out over the next couple of days while we get my computer put back together. For everybody who tuned in, for those of you listening live, the show's in two pieces for the moment, but here, as soon as we are done, I will get everything put together and get it put out under a single link so that Grouchy can share it and everybody can enjoy it. And again, thanks to everybody who's tuned in. I think what happened, Grouchy, is I think we actually caught up to the TuneIn server at some point, and I noticed you'd been putting that link out all over the place today. So I think everybody figured out that it was on there, so I think they were all tuning in there at the same time. I think it was TuneIn that actually dragged everything down, because it's still tied into the same
whatever
stuff.
It takes, man. I just like hearing that there were so many people trying to listen that it bogged everything down. That's incredible.
I know, right? This is only the third time that I know of that this has ever happened, and it's usually tied in with the apps, because for some reason they get such wider traffic, And Spreaker is designed for really large traffic, but when a lot of people all click the button at the same time, it messes with the counts. Those won't be right for about 3 or 4 days, and it also typically brings the server completely down. So thanks to everybody who did try to tune in tonight. And again, we will have it up as a podcast here in just a second as soon as I edit the two pieces back together so that you guys don't keep having to look for two separate links. And again, hats off to Grouchy. I do want to say this personally. I've been saying it on the air quite a bit, but this is actually one of our newest shows that we personally produce here at the Spark Radio Network, as well as K98Talk.com. And of course, we couldn't do it without him, but it also makes me really happy to see it is also one of the fastest growing shows that we have currently. And soon I do hope to have him on places like iHeart and Stitcher right there beside me, so we can make it a competition and start giving everybody a run for their money. All right,
I am all about it. All about it.
That's going to do it for us tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to stop monopolizing because I know a lot of you right now are like, dude, would you just stop talking? We want to go listen to Bunny. So you guys have a good night. Head over to 405. Show Bunny some love. And don't forget, even if you can't do it tonight, she'll be right back here with you tomorrow night as a replay. So if nothing else, you can always catch it here. You guys have a good night, folks. And I'm going to go hang out with Bunny with you as soon as I get this podcast put together. Take care, folks.
Peace.